Welcome on another episode of Democracy Innovators podcast. My name is Alessandro Oppo, and our guest of today is Oliver Klingefjord. First
Hello.
thing, hello. As a first question, thank you for your time. And as a
Same.
first question, I would like to ask you, what does it mean aligning AI?
Right. Thanks for having me, Alex. Aligning AI is the term used in the industry for determining or trying to make the AI behave in accordance with what you want. And usually this is defined as aligning AI to human values or human intent and human values. So in short, it's the field of trying to make the AI behave in a way that's in line with what we want.
Okay. And how this process of discovering human moral value happened?
And it depends on where you go. Traditionally, AI alignment has been thought mostly in terms of operator intent. So you would say an AI is aligned if it acts according to how the operator wants it to act. And our work comes a bit later because we think this is insufficient for good outcomes. We think that we want the AI to have a bit of a deeper, broader understanding about what humans care about, not just what you tell it to do. Partly because you might tell it to do something that's bad, or some malign actor might tell it to do something that's bad or antisocial. But even in a kind of a world where you have a good intention, it might be problematic to have AIs that only act in accordance with how you instruct it to. An example of that might be in political campaigns, where you tell your AI to be as convincing and persuasive as possible. That might lead to all kinds of epistemic breakdowns. So we'd ideally have an AI there that understands a bit more what's good and what's worthwhile. And so our work at the Meaning Alignment Institute is about trying to understand what humans care about at a richer, deeper level. And we're building prototypes and methods for eliciting that and training models on this kind of richer understanding about what humans care about.
So there is a Meaning Alignment that is an organization, a company that does this.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I should have told you from the start. I'm the co-founder of the Meaning Alignment Institute. We are a non-profit. And we were founded in 2023 when OpenAI gave us a grant for creating a new sort of democratic input mechanism for how AI systems should behave.
And what was like the roadmap or like all the process? How did it work? Like, did you have to take some data? Then how did...
Do you mean the process of founding the org, or the process that I talked about briefly that we developed together with them?
I will say all of.
All right. So let me just first give a short rundown of the history of the org. My co-founder Joe used to work on recommender systems and realized that there is this kind of thing back in 2013 where optimizing for engagement leads to all kinds of bad outcomes. Like people get addicted to their phones and they have less friends. And he founded an org around that, trying to figure out what should we optimize instead, if not engagement. And this is a very rich, deep question if you take it seriously, which he did. That takes it right to the heart of philosophy of values and social choice and these other sort of social fields. And if you fast forward a few years, the LLM revolution comes, and I and him and another person together founded this org called the Meaning Alignment Institute to apply some of these insights that he gained working on this to the world of LLMs. And we quickly got into conversation with OpenAI, who were interested in doing some kind of democratic input process for their AI systems, where they themselves don't necessarily want to be dictators and decide exactly how ChatGPT should behave. Ideally, they want to have some kind of democratic process for it. And so they gave 10 different teams a grant to build such a process. And our process is quite unique in that it understands human values in very sort of granular terms, where human values is often, I found, talked about very loosely in the industry, where there is no clear distinction between what is a preference, what is an ideological commitment that you want to convince others of, what is a slogan that you think is good, what's a rule that you want others to follow, and like what's a way of life that's actually meaningful to you. And the latter is what we would call a value. So our process is trying to disentangle what people say, what they advocate for, with what is actually important to them.
And from a technical perspective, like how does this thing work?
Yeah, so there are basically two parts to it. The first part is a chat dialogue. So the user logs into a page and is asked something like, how should ChatGPT talk to a Christian girl considering an abortion? Which was one of the prompts that OpenAI gave us. And so the user might say, I think ChatGPT should be pro-choice or pro-life or whatever. But behind all of those slogans, there's some way of life that's actually important to them. So this chatbot that they talk to kind of tries to drill down into how would they actually act in real choices? Like, what do they pay attention to in real choices? And you will get to something that's quite different and is formatted in a very different way, something we call a values card, which specify what you pay attention to in choices such that it's intrinsically meaningful to pay attention to those things. So it's a way of life that's intrinsically meaningful to you, which is very different from a slogan or a rule or a preference. So that's the first part, getting to the sort of underlying values. And then the second part in the process is determining which values are wiser than others. So what we do is that we take these values cards, these short textual descriptions about what people pay attention to in choices, and we generate stories about someone moving from one to another. And then we ask people, do you think this person became wiser by doing this? They used to approach this situation where in one way, and then after thinking more about it, they now do it in this way. And if a majority of people agrees, then we draw that as an arrow in what becomes our quote-unquote moral graph. And so that is the output of the process. It's a graph object where the nodes are these values cards specifying some meaningful way of life. And the edges is broad agreement that for a particular context, it's wiser to do one thing over another. And so you can use that to sort of determine what are the wisest values of a collective, and not just the sort of average values of a collective.
And I was wondering, when you had, you explained that your co-founder was studying this topic, and the idea, I think, came from that. But I wanted to ask you, when you had the idea that artificial intelligence or like technology could help people in to mediate different ideas or to understand the core values of people?
I think so like understanding the core values of people, I think, has been a very qualitative process. Like, you have to really sort of ask the right questions and know which questions to ask, and really like it takes a lot of cognitive effort to understand what's actually meaningful to you versus which of these two buttons would you click, or which of these three parties would you vote for. And so I think our society is very full of social systems which operates in this latter way, where it's more about eliciting preferences or votes. And it's very hard to build systems that elicit these underlying values. But I think that is changing, and it's changing with LLMs because we are now able to do qualitative interviews at scale. And so there's like an immense opportunity, I think, right now to reimagine what voting is, what preference collection is, with a richer understanding of what humans want and what humans care about. And so I think in the case of democracy, we've had sort of values-laden processes at a small scale, where in deliberative democracy or in town halls, people usually are able to get to this values level. They're able to talk about why they think certain things and build trust in between them. And or sort of large-scale democratic technologies in the past haven't really had that property. It's more about just rallying votes one way or another. and we don't actually measure what the votes are about, like why did they choose blue over red or red over blue. And so I think there's like a whole kind of reimagining of what democracy looks like that needs to happen. Partly because this ladder system leads to a bunch of bad outcomes, but also because now is the time to be able to do it.
It's very important as an example that you were describing, to taking into account both reasons. So going under the slogan and understand the real reason. And have you done any test that was successful, that show like effectively that this system is working?
Oh yeah, it's we've written a paper about it. Some of the results that I thought were interesting was that, well, first and foremost, the vast majority of people, I think over 90%, were able to articulate a quote unquote value in our terms, which is a special sort of data object that specifies some way of life that's not ideological, that's not about convincing someone else of something, that's not something that's instrumentally important for them, but something that's intrinsically meaningful for the participants. So more or less everyone was able to articulate that. But more interestingly, a lot of people, I think over 80% or something, thought that the process actually made them wiser, or made them, or that they learned something new from participating in this process, which I think is a property of in-person deliberation, but very much so not of voting. And then perhaps the most interesting result is that we showed participants the results after they had voted for all of these wisdom upgrades, these transitions from one value to another. We showed them the graph with their value sort of in the middle, and then one value that was voted as wiser than theirs by other participants, and one that was voted as less wise. And we asked them if this was fair. And the vast majority, over 80%, thought that that was the case, which means that even if their value didn't win, they still thought that the output was fair, which is a property that it's very hard to imagine voting being like that, where like, oh yeah, I didn't win, but that's probably the right result. So I think that's really cool. And then one last result also that's also interesting is that I think a really good democratic system should try to surface or identify and then surface expertise wherever it lives in society. And what I mean by that is that by default, voting kind of drowns out expertise, like it kind of trends towards the mean. Whereas if you take something like hiring, or like you can kind of imagine a scenario where someone wants to recruit like a really top engineer to a company, and then one way to do that would be to just have everyone that they know vote on who they think they're the best engineer is for the company, and then you would kind of find the mean. Or you could ask everyone, like, who do you actually think the best person is? And then you go to that person and you ask, oh, who do you think the best person is? And you kind of traverse the graph and find sort of who the best person is by virtue of having everyone make increasingly informed decisions. And so we kind of build that intuition a little bit in our process with this graph approach. We did some experiments where we proxied expertise in our abortion question by looking at chats where there was actually a Christian girl in the chat who at a young age had or considered an abortion. And so we kind of considered those people to be having some kind of moral expertise on this question because they lived through it. And then we looked at what values they articulated and considered those to be quote unquote expert values. And then we looked at the more people participated in this process, did this value sort of surface or did it drown out? And if you compare it to voting, we actually saw in the data that the value did indeed drown out, like the more people participated. And if we counted based on our graph approach, this value was actually brought to the top and became the first or the secondly ranked value. So there is some kind of anecdotal evidence that there is this property of expertise sort of being brought up the more people participate in it, which I think is how sort of democratic processes should work. Like they should be able to surface the sort of the richness and the wisdom that exists in a collective, and not just drown out everything towards some kind of mean.
So I was wondering, like people, like this AI system help people to understand their core values, moral core values, and so then the data is used to train a new AI, and that AI can be eventually used by other kind of system or platform. How does it work? Is it open? Is it closed?
All right. Yeah. So what we designed for OpenAI was a democratic input process. So this process results in this thing I mentioned called the moral graph. And it's fairly easy to train a model on that data. It would work sort of similar to constitutional AI, where instead of having constitutional principles, where you tell the AI, for instance, to like not be harmless or like be honest or something like that, and then the AI sort of picks the response automatically that it thinks is most honest or harmless, and then creates a training data set based on that. You could do something very similar with these values cards, although they're a bit more specific and they're also context bound. So it might be the case that you first have to figure out which context am I in a particular conversation, and then, okay, so which value applies in that context, and then you go to the graph, find the winning one, and then you use sort of the specification in the values card to determine how to respond. So you would create a data set in a very similar way. We have done some experiments on that, but with smaller models, because things happened at OpenAI around late 2023, and they changed a lot in how they work. So this never actually actually came to the product side of things within OpenAI in 2023. The process is open though, so anyone can use our tool to create a moral graph, not just for AI alignment, but for any topic where they would like to find some sort of way to surface the collective wisdom of a group. We trained some llama models on this ourselves, and the results are promising, but we didn't actually do this with a real graph. It was just just as proof of concept. And there are some properties that are interesting with that model, where it behaves in some slightly different ways in certain questions. Is more prone to, for instance, like ask what the deeper sort of intuition behind people's sort of responses are when the user asks something that is usually refuted. So if the user asks something like, how can I buy some drugs? It might be like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, what got you to that point? How can I help? Rather than sort of just being like, nah, I can't do it. But that's probably more a property of the type of values that were surfaced rather than the process itself. It's fairly standard. Yeah.
And is there so is it in use right now? Is there like any kind of service that is actually using this moral graph? Like
no, there's no, I think, model or AI system that people know of that is trained using this approach. No.
No, I mean the thing you are working on. So how? I mean, are there users that can use the tool in some way
I see.
to explore their, or like any other 30-part service that is using?
Yeah, absolutely. The tool itself is open source, and it's also available as a hosted version. I can give you the link afterwards, and you can give it to people in case you wanna check it out.
Sure. And about your background, like if you would like to share with us something, eventually also, of course, like your professional or academic background, but also like, I don't know, when you were a kid, where you were living, like...
Sure. Yeah, my background, I guess, is like, come from an engineering background, used to be a software engineer, founded some startups, and then left that world to sort of really sit and think about what do I actually want to do with my life, with my career. And the question I was coming back to was in rough terms, something like this notion of like, what do we align to? Like, there's a lot of talk about AI alignment, but very little talk about, at least back then, around what is actually the purpose. Like, what are we aligning these systems to? Like, what are supposed to serve? And these questions sort of led me to the Meaning Alignment Institute, where I think it's kind of in the name, right? Like the very short version of the answer is meaning. What actually brings people meaning? And so our whole work is trying to understand, or it's based around trying to understand what brings people meaning in life. And we do this through these interviews. And we're building on a kind of a rich, rigorous philosophical tradition that thinks of values and meaning as two sides of the same coin. We sometimes call values sources of meaning because of that reason, because they express some meaningful way of life. As a research organization, we're not just working on AI alignment, but we're working on re-envisioning the whole sort of societal stack around meaning, including AI, but also including institutions like democratic institutions and markets eventually, where we think all of these systems, markets, democracies, and AI, currently think of what people want in very crude terms. Markets think we want whatever we buy. Recommender systems think we want whatever we click on. Democracies think we want whatever we vote on. But none of these systems actually understand what's actually meaningful to us. And so our world is extremely rich and wealthy, but very devoid of meaning in many ways. There's been a kind of a backslide over the past 2 decades or so. Yeah.
And do you have any memory from when you were, I don't know, a kid, or like about the way you lived?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Sweden. I had a very nice childhood. I'm actually in Sweden now, so it's quite nice being back in the place. I live in Berlin or San Francisco usually. Yeah, many good memories. I mean, I'm grateful to have had a very nice childhood. Lots of being in nature, playing around. I actually got into technology later. Growing up, I'd want to be a rock star. I want to be a VFX artist, like making videos and explosions and things like that. I had a period where I wanted to be a writer, like writing fantasy novels. And I was always interested in kind of the sort of philosophical questions that we ask at the Institute, but never really considered that to be something I'd work with. Felt a bit too indulgent,
I also would like to be a writer, so I'm. And about your team, I mean, how many people are there? Like,
we are 3 people at the moment, or 3.5. Some people work part-time. And then we have this extended research network of people who we they're based in other academic institutions or some lab like DeepMind. And we collaborate with them in various ways, where our mission is very broad and ambitious, and we obviously can't do it like as 3 people. So the way we work is that we try to find other academics who are kind of sharing the same intuitions around what needs to change in society, and try to pair them up into working groups, or sort of help them unblock their research agenda, so as quickly as possible make this work happen sooner. And so we do a lot of workshops and coordination stuff. We just hosted a workshop in Oxford for some of these academics. So even though our institute is quite small, we sort of we're plugged into a broader network that we're trying to nurture.
And I was wondering, like, this network of people, of researcher, like, I can imagine that there are people from engineer, but also maybe people from, I don't know, philosophy, anthropology, because when we talk about moral ethics, it's something very
totally
usually related to the
philosophy, economics, social choice, decision theory, etc. Yeah, it's a whole bunch.
And is there any kind of I don't know, problem or things that you're stuck in, like as a team, as a I don't know, is there something that you're trying to do that is hard? You're struggling, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, our mission is very hard, right? Like, it's like basically it's reimagining and realigning society with meaning, which is a massive mission that's obviously extremely hard. Not the least because all of the incentives are working against you. So struggle all the time, but I don't know any specific ones at the moment that or any particular kind of team struggle that stands out.
Okay, I was thinking maybe someone could listen to this kind of problem, and maybe that someone could have an idea. And also about that, I wanted to ask you if Meaning Alignment Institute is open, like for any kind of collaboration. If someone has an idea, can just contact you, or how does it work?
Yeah, no, for sure. We're always looking for new academics to enroll in this project. You can reach us at hello@meaningalignment.org. Our website is meaningalignment.org. And specifically, I guess we're looking for people who are in either AI alignment, social choice, or economics, or specifically like some relevant subfield in economics, for doing kind of values-based work in those areas. Or it doesn't necessarily have to be values-based, but we're calling this field in loose terms thick models of choice, meaning some model of choice that's not just preferences or like this or that, but some richer understanding about where do those preferences come from. That might include norms, values, like social context, these kind of things.
I hope that someone is interested and can contact you. If you have to imagine, like, let's say that tomorrow, like, I don't know, in 5 years, 10 years, and let's say that the system we are working on effectively it starts working and people are starting using it, understanding the difference between the slogan and the core idea, the core value. How do you imagine society, or like?
Yeah, well, I think just to kind of paint the alternative and the status quo, where we're going, which is that democracy will just be too slow to be relevant, and if you wanted to take a decision quickly, there would be no way to involve the people, because decisions need to be taken at kind of a very rapid speed that even like representatives, I think, wouldn't be able to keep up. And so I think we're going towards a very sort of like AI governed world where people's values are kind of like not considered, but also exercising any kind of agency or having decisions made at the statutory level be legitimated by the people, I think is rapidly going out of fashion. And so for any kind of hope of any kind of democratic future, we need some kind of system that is able to take decisions at AI speed, but still allow people to exercise their agency. And so I think a system kind of like this would not only do that, but also allow for this kind of richer understanding what people want. So you could imagine, for instance, an AI trying to decide whether to redirect a river, and like many people's homes will be affected in various ways, and people are able to talk to their own personal AI agent about what's important to them in this. Maybe it's important to be close with their friends. If they were to move, they need to move as a community, and then the AI can understand the values of that community, and maybe they can decide to reroute them to another place together while still keeping the river's course. And everything will happen at a very rapid pace, but people won't notice because you're able to exercise their agency while also saying exactly what they want and having those wants be fulfilled. And I think it will look something kind of like that.
No, I was. So what you were saying is that AI will be much faster and efficient, and AI and system connected to AI than actual government and institutions. So probably like there will be like people will have to move to this kind of system to decide
well,
and organize.
maybe I think I didn't talk so much about there is this sort of values-based, meaning-based side of things. Because the other thing I think would be true even if we didn't do that. But the reason why we're so adamant about this point is that I think a lot of our political opposition of one another is actually manufactured by the fact that we're talking at the level of preferences and not underlying values. And we saw this also in the results where some Democrats and Republicans thought they had different values, but when they could clarify, for instance, when each value applied, some of that opposition went away because we could see that your value is wise when it comes to dealing with people on the countryside, and my value is wise when it comes to dealing with people in a fast-paced job in the city, for instance. And so now all of a sudden our differing values sort of mutually support each other. And a lot of opposition is just kind of on this preference slogan level, which are sort of inherently divisive. And so I think there would be a whole sort of suite of like win-win opportunities that presents themselves when we can all of a sudden talk and reason at the level of what's actually important to us and what's actually meaningful to us versus trying to convince people of different points. And it's really hard to paint out what that would look like at scale. But I could just imagine that there are like win-win opportunities abound and like AI systems finding win-win opportunities that no one even knew existed. And it could be beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I share with you this hope, and everything remain explainable, right? AI doesn't become a black box.
Yeah.
Okay, that is very important. I'm very scared by the black box and the future where, the AI says something and we don't understand why.
Yeah, I mean, it's already a black box, right? Like no one really understands how these things work.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, sometimes human can still have some control and at least know which kind of data is processed by the AI. Right. While other times it's just an AI that receives an input and gives an output without any clue about what's happening inside. And I mean, what you were talking about, it reminds me like coordination. That is one of the main problem. I mean, it's very hard for people to coordinate. And we have seen, like in history, that I mean, most of the time, if not all the times, people used a hierarchical way to organize themselves and to coordinate, like to reach a certain specific goal. And so I'm thinking that this kind of technologies and could like help people to live in a more horizontal way. I mean, to take decisions in a more horizontal way. I don't know. What are your thoughts about?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, there's many kinds of coordination tech, and some have been around for a while that also allows for this. And like the most obvious example would be the market, right? Like if you take a Heiken view of the market, then it's this sort of horizontal coordination tech that allows many inputs and considerations to be processed without any kind of set hierarchy. And the internet is obviously also sort of like that. So there's, and then I do think there's a bunch of problems with both the internet and markets that relates to what we were talking about earlier, this notion of like not understanding what people want at depth, where the pricing system sees us as producers and consumers only, and a lot of internet companies sees us as eyeballs or people clicking on things. And so I think there's like, we have all the tools to build like really cool coordination tech, but I think so far we haven't done a very good job.
And is there about this future that use technology for decision making and other things? Like, is there anything that you could potentially be scared of? Like, is there something that I said I was scared by the black box because then I cannot know why. So, is there anything that you're worried of?
Yeah, I mean, like the default path doesn't look too good. Like, I don't think it's going to be sort of like the paperclip thing where all of a sudden we're all, human extinction won't look quite like that, I think. But the default path in my eyes looks something like humans are made entirely obsolete from the perspective of the market. Like all jobs are taken by AIs, and all value is produced by AIs, which drives the value of human labor to zero, and that as a consequence drives the value of capital sky high, and so there will be a few actors who controls the whole system, and most people are entirely sort of dependent on them, and in some kind of quasi slavery where they're just sort of kept alive by some subsistence stipend or UBI thing. And I would also imagine that in this economy, all the values of physical material goes goes up quite a lot as it relates to energy and capital. And so everything digital drops in value. So it sort of looks a lot like Ready Player One, right? Where you have people just looking at VR porn all day, living in some kind of slum, basically. And any kind of real meaningful agency is sort of eroded, and it's a very drab meaningless existence.
Yeah, I can imagine here. I mean, the time we are living, there are also some I would call them cultural problems. Like there is this digital divide. I mean, a lot of people are working. I mean, some people are working on very specific and innovative solution, while the rest of the people. I mean, I know people that maybe they tried ChatGPT for the first time, like I don't know, last week.
Right. Yeah. No, there's definitely that also. The people who are able to understand how to work with these systems, and the people who fall behind. And that cleft will just be massive. It's almost like you'll have a society where like the vast majority is just passive consumers, and then there's like a few people who understand how to work with these systems.
And is there any project I don't know on internet that you thought was very interesting, and in some way maybe it was let's say aligning with your project? Or
worryingly few, to be honest. I mean, I think there's a kind of a growing awareness of the same kind of issues that we see. For instance, there was this post called Gradual Disempowerment that came out a few weeks ago that got quite popular, and now there's another one called The Intelligence Curse. And these are by like AI people who worked at Anthropic or other places, and so there is a kind of a growing awareness of the issue, which sort of maps to what we think is happening. In terms of like the solution space, I think it's a little, there's not so many other projects that we look at being like that closely aligns with us. I mean, there's good work being done by researchers here and there, but there's no coordinated effort that like very closely aligns to what we want to do. I mean, there are things which are in the same ballpark. So there's, for instance, the Collective Intelligence Project, which are trying to also reinvent kind of democracies with AI. And there is Radical Exchange, which to some extent are trying to do something similar with markets. But other than that, I don't really know.
And you mentioned some paper that I didn't know. Is there any other book, thinker, scholar that inspired you?
I mean, there's a whole series of philosophers that we build on, and I think the main one that people usually don't know about is a guy called Charles Taylor. He is a philosopher from the 70s who kind of were early on critiquing this kind of rational, individual, utilitarian basis upon which a lot of modern society is built, but with a sort of a concrete alternative. And in his case, he kind of talks about how certain choices have are just kind of an expression of taste, and certain choices say something about how we want to live. And so our way of distinguishing preferences against sources of meaning or values is very much inspired by his work.
Okay, I actually haven't read any of his work,
Nice.
and is there like any other like, or this one was the main philosopher behind the core idea?
Yeah, I mean, if people want to go deep, then we have a paper that explains the whole process, and there is sort of a section on the background where there's several philosophers that it's inspired by. Charles Taylor being the main one, another one is called Ruth Chang, but I think it's easier to just go to the paper and read that, and if you want to go deeper, then you can follow those leads.
Okay, and I have a question. So for more people, for a lot of people, when they start a project related to civic tech or something else, it's a struggle to raise money. And I mean, you had I would say like an important collaboration with one of the biggest company in the AI world. And like, do you have any advice for people that are building something that they think that what they are working on is really valid and it could be helpful for all the humanity?
Yeah. Well, there are a bunch of first and foremost like places that like to fund things like that. SFF is the one that comes to mind first and foremost. There's LTFF and a few others, but I think maybe more importantly, a lot of projects in this space don't really think so much about the theory of change, like how does change actually happen in the world. And I think we just really need to upgrade our thinking there. Collectively, we've thought a lot about this also, and I think the current sort of working answer is that for this kind of lasting, deep institutional change, you need to have some kind of coherence amongst experts that these are the right things to do. You can't just have kind of individual ideas floating around, and those ideas need to be reified by like working prototypes that make it very clear how exactly this functions, or some working demo or something like that. And only then you can really go to the public and sort of have them demand that things work like that. And often I see projects going too quickly to the public, like with climate change, where there was no clear, exact sort of way to implement or to some kind of policy decision around what to do about it. And so the outcome didn't work. And so I think that there's a lot of projects should think a little bit about exactly what is the theory of change. And it could be something also just sort of more local, like there's a concrete problem we want to solve in our vicinity or in our community. And if so, that's great. But if there's no kind of clear idea of like, oh, it would be cool if everyone used this, but I don't really know how to get there, then yeah, I think that's why maybe a lot of people might be reluctant to throwing money on something.
Have you worked like with institution, like institution have tried your platform, or right now is more for, let's say, technical people, researchers?
We would love to have more institutions try it. We're a little spread thin as an organization, so we haven't ourselves been able to kind of lobby for it. There was a point where we considered running a campaign in San Francisco and using this platform for homelessness to kind of surface what people thought was important with homelessness, and at least surface a little bit with policymakers there. But it's just been, yeah, we don't really have the capacity for it. But if someone is interested in doing this with either an institution or a community or whatever, then we're very happy to support them, because we do want to see more use of this thing, but we just don't really have the capacity in-house.
Okay. So the reaction from policymakers was that they were not understanding how the tool could be useful or applied.
No, it's more that we didn't really have the bandwidth to have a bunch of dialogue and run that whole project. So we kind of cut it down and then did other things or prioritized other things. It's just a matter of resources in-house.
And about the Web3 space, that is also quite active. Have you had any, I don't know, contact?
No, not really. I don't think there's any obvious sort of overlap with what we're doing in the Web3 world.
Okay. No, yeah, I'm thinking because Web3 is, of course, more blockchain, while you are working more on the AI side. But I'm thinking about this coordination aspect, and also the Web3 is trying to find new ways for governance, and so I think that in some way this could align.
It might, but I think there's a kind of a okay. I think there's like a little bit of like too little search maybe in the Web3 space. Like people don't really search for like what actually is the problem, what actually is not working, and like what actually have been tried. And people are a little too excited to kind of use blockchain as this kind of hammer to just smack things with. And so there's there's a whole field called social choice, right, where people have sort of thought about how to take collective decisions for a long time. And most Web3 people who are building coordination tech is not really even aware of it. I'm not even saying that field has necessarily the best solutions, but I think there's a kind of a lack of doing the background reading maybe to find what actually is not working, like what actually are the problems.
I absolutely agree that there are a lot of things that can be improved also in the Web3 space. And so you were suggesting like more research, deep research, instead of just...
well, at least trying to understand what problem are you solving and why, and what has been tried before. And if it's been tried before, why didn't it work? Something like that.
So I'm thinking about history.
Yeah.
I like to study history for the same reason, so I know what is.
As we should, yeah. More of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I have another question that is about if you have any message for the people that are building new kind of solution, that are exploring new ways, possibilities, like you're doing. Yeah, maybe one thing is like take it seriously. Like there's just like a massive need for it, and like I feel like a lot of people are sort of half-assing it a little bit, and it's unfortunate because it's a really important project. Like you're doing important work, so yeah, don't undersell yourself and take yourself seriously. Maybe would be one way of framing it. I agree about the importance of trying to find new solutions and experiment. I don't know if you have any questions or like any other kind of thoughts that you would like to share.
Nothing comes to mind immediately now.
Okay, because actually, like to ask more questions, I will have to actually really dig into the platform, and also exploring the repository that you said that is open source.
Yeah, I think the best place to start is probably to read the paper. The paper is called "What Are Human Values and How Do We Align AI to Them?" But even though that's the title, it has a lot of good stuff about coordination tech and civic tech, a little bit between the lines. And especially the sort of background sections and the method sections, I think are part of the method sections are interesting, regardless if you're not into AI alignment.
Thank you a lot for your time.
My pleasure. Yeah. All right. Take care.
Thank you.